Network security, we are already in chapter 2, and what we did was we covered some terms. Start off with, I talked about 3 layers in terms of like the hierarchy of your network. You have your access where people are allowed in. Typically we're thinking internally, and then you have your outside edge in which you communicate outside of your private network. And this is common Cisco terms, access layer, distribution layer, core. If it's a small company, they'll call it a collapsed core, in which they'll have these 2 together. So this is just a premise of getting started to look at these edges and some terminology. Alright, so that's where we come up with edge or perimeter router. You know, somewheres where you have a public or an untrusted network. Public, or sometimes the term untrusted. Like the internet, or your connection to a vendor, and so forth. We covered physical security, lock the room, access the room, all of the items to physically keep the equipment. We talked about keeping the iOS up to date, and here we're talking about internetworking operating system. And don't confuse that with little I OS, like in your iPhone. And we also talked about hardening the equipment outside of keeping the iOS updated. You know, don't run services you don't need, and so forth. We went through passwords, the idea of the complexity, the length, common words, need the changing, timing, and so forth. Has to do with the passwords. Tracking and logging what we're doing. And that led us into the next page. We talked about AAA. And in there we have authentication, authorization, auditing or accounting. Who we are. And there's a number of ways to authenticate nowadays, but you know, username, password would be a simple one, or something you have, like a card, something you know, like a password or a PIN number, and something you are, like your iris, your fingerprint, and all those things. Authorize who can do what once they're authenticated. What can they do? You know, what rights they have, what directories, and so forth. And then auditing, keeping track of what's happening. And we talked over here, logging, tracking, and logging. And then we have all those levels inside the equipment we can do. We talked a little bit about telnetting in, and then moving to SSH and keys. And we're going to talk about keys and do an example and look at how RSA works, or at least a little bit about how it works. Then we looked at some pictures. We have our IT area, and we talked about the term a DMZ. We don't have a real formal DMZ, but we have an IT area in which we have our servers and our networks and our rooms and our stuff, and then we have an edge router. Okay, this is the edge to the IT area. Okay, and we could easily, within our scenario, we have our multi-layered switch and then lots of layer 2 switches, and in there we can divide off an area for servers, an area for web servers, and how we manage that. Alright, then if we take a look over here, we have the college itself. So then there's an edge here for the whole college in terms of, this is public out here, the ICN, this is the internet, And this is what we have internally in campus. And then the college themselves, they have just like an edge. And here's an edge router. I mean, if you want to look at an edge router, right here we go. We have a couple connections going out, and this one's on the edge. The IT side connects in here, the main campus connects in here. And then inside the main campus, they have their server area, which could be part of that segmented off, who can get to what. And same thing, the wireless people, they go out on a different connection than the wired and main part of the campus goes out on a different connection, and so forth. So we have access layer and how we manage access in, and we have that edge. Out here in the internet, for example, we could have, I don't know, Amazon or Craigslist, eBay, or any place you shop or whatever. They can have a DMZ. They can have different edges here, and eventually we're going to use the term zones. We can have different zones and allow different access to different zones. So from the outside, need to let people get to the web server, but not internal to your SQL database, in which you actually keep all the important information. And so you do have some type of connection from here into here, so that you can get the information you need here to distribute here. Okay, so that's part of, you don't want your web server, can be a vulnerable point in terms, because that has access internally to the private network inside. All right, and that's it for right now. Beginning overview.